Hey, hey, hey! What's up? What's up? Welcome, everybody. Welcome, everybody, to The Inner Storyteller. Welcome back to this channel and welcome to a jolly good time. It is the humblest of hosts, your humblest of hosts, Soul Expression, reminding you to please like the video. Good people, please like the video and subscribe to the channels. It does help me get one step closer to one day monetizing this great channel with all of its great information and great humble host who's full of humility and greatness. Bam, look at that. I almost hid some of the scruff on the top of my head. Guys, if you are here, know that you are in for real conversations, okay? About natural law, religion, money, anarchy, culture, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the great. And real conversations regarding how mankind is manipulated by forces that do not have our best interests at heart, because they are completely evil. We are not, however, bashing faith systems or calling people stupid for having a religion on this channel. We are simply examining the psychological effects of the stories that we have the most faith in, the ones we have the most stake in, and how those stories help shape society. And that examination sits right alongside an honest look at the current human condition, which is slavery. Government. Government is slavery. And the question we have to keep coming back to is what can actually be improved with a proper and thorough understanding of the inner storyteller and how it works. Now, if any of that makes you a little uneasy, makes you a little angry, or makes you uncomfortable in any way, please be assured and reassured, good people, that although you are 1,000%, 100,000%, 100 million gajillion billion% encouraged to stay and confront those feelings along with me, you are welcome to leave right after you like the video. All right, good people, we got a cool show for you today. Got a cool show for you today. Got a cool show for you today. Sorry for the little random song there. I'm obviously looking all around because I got two screens. I got my monitor, y'all. I have my monitor. Look at that beautiful curved monitor. And my new light. Did I show you? Yeah, I've set up my new light. So we are in business, good people. We are in business. Don't let them lie to you. Don't let them hate on me. Okay? I'm a professional. I didn't even turn on my other light on that side. That's why my face is dark on that side. Hold on one second. Let me get that light. Let me get that light going. Can't have a light off. Sorry, that took longer than expected. I did indeed encounter an unexpected development when I was trying to turn the light on, which is the fact that the light was unplugged for whatever reason. This plug is all the way in the freaking corner of the room, but for some odd reason, somebody, another adult that I live with in this Cribonacci, wanted to unplug it. We will speak about that later. Just kidding. All right, guys. Looking at the thumbnail, looking at the title of the video, you may be wondering why the word spell, the word spell book, and the word magic are all in the title. Is this somehow turning into a magic show? Am I going to take my headphone bag, stick my hand in, and pull out a hat? No. I'm going to pull out more headphone cords, of course. Oh, my Scruffy's back. Hi, Scruffy. Oh, well. No! This is not a magic show. We are just talking about the word magic employed by the order giver class, the ruling class, and examining what that word magic does to our psychological makeup, right? So let's dive into the spell and the spell book, contract law, word magic, and the self-destruction of the lie, and the destruction of the lie. Okay? In the script I have "and the self-destruction of the lie," but as you can see, I changed the title to "and the destruction of the lie." Because it doesn't matter who's destroying the lie. If the lie is destroyed, then truth can take its place. Today, good people, we are going to follow a thread that starts way back. Way back. Oh, way back, yeah. Okay? Right here, what we're going to do is indeed go back. I met her when I was. We are going all the way back to ancient Sumer. And that's where the story begins. The story ends with why the entire legal architecture of modern civilization is structurally self-destructive. Okay, self-destructive by way of its frameworks. And that's not a dramatic opening for the sake of drama. That's the logic. Excuse me, that's where the logic actually leads when you follow it honestly. So let's follow it. Let's go down the rabbit hole. Let's talk about contract law and how it came first in the pecking order. Before constitutions, before statutory law, before public ordinances and city ordinances, before regulatory agencies, before executive orders, and before case law or legal precedent, there was contract law. We're talking about clay tablets in ancient Sumer, 5,000-6,000 years ago. Written agreements between parties, enforceable through social and eventually institutional authorities. The concept is very ancient. Two or more parties agree to terms. Those terms are recorded officially. And the record becomes binding. Now, this is a concept, and for it to actually manifest, it must be acted out. We must put on our masks and pretend, as we do. And as we've discussed, if you don't know what I'm talking about with pretending, when it seems like I'm talking about regular human activity, just know that on this channel, we talk very ontologically about all subjects. And so we've discussed already at length that in order for life to happen and interaction to happen the way it does today, with the way that we speak out loud and we text and write each other all the time, we play all of these roles from, parent and auntie and uncle to plumber, firefighter, assistant, secretary, CEO, as well as party goer, Sagittarius, all of the labels, right? We pretend these labels. We put them on, we give our take on it, and in our quiet moments, we take all of those masks off. We're not actually those labels. Our identity is not actually rooted in those labels, although we do get a lot of self-worth from doing this pretend. So that's all I mean, and I just wanted to make sure that you understood that the concept of the record being binding is acted out and pretended to the extent that people die for violating certain terms on certain contracts. And the death is ruled legitimate by the institution and or social order overseeing the contract law of that region at that time. Everything that came after, every legal instrument that modern government uses to bind the behavior of its population, is built on top of that foundation of contract law. The Constitution of any nation is a contract. The statute is an extension of the Constitution. The ordinance, the regulation, the executive order, the court precedent, all of them are derivatives of that same root concept. Written terms that carry a binding, so-called binding authority over the people subject to said terms, over the people who agree to said terms. And here is where the connection to the inner storyteller matters most, because contract law contains within it a mechanism that most people have never examined. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. We're going to get into the play on definitions, because the very concept that words have definitions is a powerful one. Symbols. One second. Coach Collins just started playing on my phone very, very randomly. I had that YouTube video playing, and didn't touch my phone. My phone was over here, kind of almost out of arm's reach, and it just started playing. Anyway, we are going to get into how definitions plays a role in all of this, because the very concept of definitions, of words, which are symbols, actually carrying definitions, is something that we pretend. Now, this pretend is a very useful pretend, but it is pretense. It's made up and agreed on, and until it's normalized and it kind of becomes second nature, but it's not actual nature that words or symbols carry meaning. Okay, they don't. And it's completely fine to do this pretend, and I do it, and we have to do it. I wrote a script, right? We have to pretend, but words do not actually carry meaning. And those in the top order giving seats of the order giver class know this beyond the shadow of a doubt, and they play specific games with the public in this domain of definitions and the malleability of definitions. Words mean what the contract says they mean. In ordinary language, words mean what they mean. Security means safety. Person means a human being. Value means worth. Service means something rendered to another. These are the definitions your inner storyteller files when it hears those words in ordinary course of living. That filing happens before conscious reasoning can intervene, which is essentially a description of the sorting function of the inner storyteller just doing its job. In contract law, words mean what the contract defines the words to mean, not what the ordinary person thinks it means, and not what the mass distributed dictionary, most mass distributed dictionary, would tell you the word means. Not what common usage has been used in the word's establishment and not its etymology, right? What the contract says they mean is the definition of the words in a contract. Often in a definition section buried in the middle of a document written in language designed to discourage close reading, you sign documents, you sign contracts, terms and conditions, and the like, without understanding what you signed. For instance, the word security in a financial contract does not mean safety. A security is any tradable financial instrument to a large extent. Any note, any draft, any certificate of indebtedness, any instrument that constitutes evidence of indebtedness at all can be considered a security. On top of security, you have security interest. On top of security interest, you have all of these other definitions. But your ordinary use of the word security feels like safety, not a literal financial instrument. Even the word instrument may feel a little off to people who are completely unfamiliar with banking terms. Because you think of instrument, you think of musical, something that can deliver melody or percussion or something like that. The word person, in many legal contexts, does not mean a human being. It means a legal entity, which can be a corporation, a trust. The word compensation in a recording contract for music, for the music industry, does not mean what a musician means when they say they want to get paid for their work. And this is not a bug in the system, right? This is the system. And it's the word magic in its most formalized, institutionalized, legally enforceable expression. The container carries the label that your inner storyteller recognizes. The content inside the container is something entirely different, right? And by the time the dispensary becomes apparent, Jesus Christ, please forgive me. I am, as of right now, still a pothead. So dispensary comes out instead of discrepancy. Anyway, by the time the discrepancy between the content inside the container and what the inner storyteller recognizes the words to mean, the content inside the container being the contract, the discrepancy between those two becomes apparent. Usually, when a breach occurs or a payment doesn't arrive, you are already bound by the definition that you didn't know applied because you signed for it. For example, if you were defrauded by a company, if a company ran a scheme on you, you found it out, and you built a case, and then you took that case to court, and you were correct, right? That they actually did run a scheme, you actually did collect the correct evidence to prove that they did it, and you took them to court. If your contract has in it a mandatory arbitration clause, and it's a legitimate mandatory arbitration clause, and you didn't know that because you never read the terms and conditions, you never scrolled all the way to the bottom where some of the juicy stuff is, or in the direct middle where some of the other juicy stuff is, and you never looked up the legal definition in Black's Law Dictionary or some other resource that can help clarify these things for you, and you didn't do um uh do what the contract said you have to do in order to set aside in order to assert your right to bring suit against them for fraud, then what's going to happen is you're going to file your case and you're going to get a letter eventually from the opposing counsel, opposing legal side, and they're going to say, we're going to file a motion to dismiss just to let you know, out of an abundance of caution, we're going to send you a letter and let you know that we're filing this motion to dismiss your case due to improper venue. And you're going to be like, improper venue? I just I just took you to the court in the correct jurisdiction. What are you talking about? This is, I live here. You're everywhere nationwide, so I bring you to the court in my state. That's what I'm supposed to do. You defrauded me. And then the court is going to honor that dismissal because the contract said you agreed to take this entity to arbitration and you tried to bring it here to state court, federal court, whatever. And that's, you agreed to go to secret court, to secret arbitration court, but you had no idea. You also had no idea that you probably had 60 or 90 days, or maybe even just 30 days to strike that from the contract and be able to take them to federal or state or whatever court. Regardless, it's just an example of a way that you not knowing what's in these contracts can mess things up for you, right? It's not cheap filing a court case, especially if you lose before you start. Let's look at a bit of a case study in the record industry, right? The music industry. Let's check this out. The recording industry deserves extended attention here because it is one of the most thoroughly documented examples of contract law as an instrument of extraction or extortion of sorts. Standard recording contracts have historically defined royalties, defined net receipts, defined promotional expenses in ways that bear almost no relationship to how those words function in ordinary English. Promotional expenses means the cost of marketing the artist, are frequently charged against the artist's royalty account, which means the company spends money promoting the brand it created around the artist's identity, and then the artist pays for that promotion out of the money the artist earned by performing. Right? Where you would think if a company is promoting you, they're not charging your account for promoting you. You would think, right, that they would get their percentage a completely different way. That you wouldn't necessarily be financially funding your own promotion if you're going to this large company because you have the skills to bring this large company a huge number of which they would get a percentage. You wouldn't think that, and you're going to pay for all your promotion, right? And they get to make the decisions on how much is spent on your promotion and how your promotion is done, but you pay for it. They tell you what you're going to pay for, in a sense, and you pay for it. The brand is, of course, owned by the company. That's why they keep control. The debt is owed by the artist. The contract defines it that way. And the artist signed, aka authorized, the contract, usually while very young, usually without adequate legal representation, usually in a position of economic vulnerability or desperation, where the alternative to signing was, a continued life they didn't want to live. And don't lose sight of the through line. Contract law definitions the malleability of definitions and words and word magic that is used is way bigger than private sector organizations. Okay, governments, every government ever operates on contract law as a foundation. Every government, every entity that is, very powerful and operates via contract law is operating high level mind control functions in society. The inner storyteller connection to this stuff is direct. And when it comes to the music industry, the artist came to the table with a story to tell about what a record deal meant to them. That story was built from cultural signals, from success, recognition. They tell themselves this is a legitimate entry into the industry. And the contract substituted a different story, but used the same words, right? They did end up with a deal, but the deal was that they pay for everything that the company decides to do at the company's discretion to promote the artist. As well as other very nefarious clauses, but we're sticking to right now just like the royalties count, the promotion and stuff like that, to not get into too dark of a territory. So the inner storyteller is directly affected, right? The sorting function of the inner storyteller never got a chance to really evaluate what was actually being agreed to, because the symbols, the words used, the diction in the contract looked exactly like the things that the inner storyteller already filed as good and safe and good dealings and fair business and all of those things. They had no idea. Right? And this is word magic enforced by law. There's a reason why none of the artists that were screwed over by these contracts got sufficient payback, and there was no real accountability for a scheme being ran and artists being extorted and extracted from. But let's widen the lens a little bit. Okay, let's talk about the proliferation of the problem. The proliferation problem. Here is where we have to get structurally sound, because the story gets very structurally interesting. The American legal system does not operate through a single instrument, of course. It operates through a layered hierarchy of instruments. And actually here I want to actually pull out the this way. Screenshots. I want to display the thumbnail. Right? Boom. Boom. And then I have to come back here. Oh, did I freaking... I did the thing. Hold on. Boom, boom. I'll be right with you all. 1 second. Boom. Oh, wait. What if I... No. So, okay. Boom. Oh, right. That's what I did. Aha. Yes, put this here. Then go back here. Make this large. I'm so sorry. I know I'm talking it through because the silence, the dead space, is messing with my mind a little bit. But it's only share, and then I have to add to stage. Then I can move this back here. Now we good. Now we cooking. Now we cooking. There we go. All right. So, just kind of take a look. We got the spell in the spell book. It began in Sumer, pardon me. Contract law came first. Words mean what the contracts say they mean. Definitions, right? More laws, more complexity, more control until the system collapses under its own weight. Constitutions, statutes, regulations, executive orders, court precedent, local ordinances, many instruments, one purpose, to do what? To bind you. All right, and we got the record industry, a little case study. So all of this is very, very, very important, and I kind of want your eyes to take in this image as we get into this section. So again, here's where it gets interesting. The American legal system does not operate through a single instrument. It operates through a layered hierarchy of instruments, each carrying its own type of authority, each requiring its own mechanism of enforcement. You got public law, PLs, passed by Congress, signed by the executive. You got statutory law, the codified body of legislation. You should really check out 8 USC. No, you know what? I ain't even gonna get into it. Not even gonna get into that today, but statutory laws, the codes, right? USC means United States Code. You have your USCs, you have your state codes, right? You got the Texas Commercial Code or Commerce Code, something like that. You got all of the state codes. You got all of the federal codes, and then there's codes for cities and stuff like that as well. And then you have ordinances, your city ordinances, local government rules, right? Aside from that, you have what's called regulations, which are rules written by administrative agencies, and they carry the force of law without going through the legislative process. Rulemakers like the FDA, the FCC, the SEC, the FDCPA, the what's it called? Right, the CFPB, right? You have executive orders, which are directives issued by the executive branch, binding on the federal government. You have court precedent, right? Prior judicial decisions that bind future court proceedings. Each one is a separate instrument, and each one requires separate institutional infrastructure to create, maintain, and enforce. Why? Why does a government need this many instruments? The honest answer is that each new instrument represents an extension of the government's capacity to bind behavior. In a context the previous instrument maybe couldn't reach. Now you have a new instrument which can bind even further the behavior of the population. The regulatory agencies exist because Congress cannot write specific enough rules for every industry. The executive orders exist because legislation moves too slowly for certain exercises of power. The ordinances exist because federal and state law cannot address every local condition. Each instrument is presented as a practical solution to a genuine administrative problem. And at the surface level, that's a bit true. But underneath that practical explanation is a structural reality worth naming very plainly. A lie. And every lie requires more lies to maintain itself. Each instrument is presented as a practical solution to a genuine administrative problem. Take jaywalking, for instance. Jaywalking can be very inconvenient, right? But there's instances where someone jaywalks because it's a completely safe move to make. It gets them to where they're going faster, and there's no cars in that are being disturbed. Other times, people do it and cause dangerous situations to arise. In the situations that did not actually end up in someone succumbing to some sort of harm, there really is no cause for someone to be harassed. But city ordinances have something else to say about that, right? Because the authority is the point. It's not actually safety. The safety is the illusory benefit of blind obedience. But the tyranny is the point. Every lie requires more lies to maintain itself. Every story that cannot survive examination requires an increasingly elaborate architecture of suppression and obfuscation to keep the examination from arriving with clarity. In a legal system built on the foundational premise that a government's authority over its population is legitimate when natural law does not recognize that legitimacy as established by documents and what some would call an elite class creating documents to define the boundaries of behavior for those not participating in the writing of said documents. All of this pretend requires continuously expanding instruments of enforcement as a gap between the claim that government is legitimate and the reality. And that gap keeps getting wider and harder to conceal. The proliferation of legal instruments is not evidence of a government growing more sophisticated or better. It's evidence, so far, if we look at the fruits and if we're honest with ourselves, it's evidence of a story requiring more spells to maintain its strength. All spells generated on lies require more spells. This is the principle worth sitting with for a moment because it has implications beyond just contract law and government. Any system whose foundational premise cannot survive honest examination will develop protective mechanisms designed to prevent that examination from occurring. Those mechanisms require maintenance. Hi, baby. 1 second. Okay. Oh, I got people on here. Let me go to the comments. Oh, nobody said anything. Guys, please like the video, share it out, subscribe to the page. I do one day want to monetize this this podcast, and let's get back into it. Those mechanisms require maintenance. Their maintenance requires further mechanisms, right? More agencies, more laws, more ordinances, a new government under a new color, right? Red or blue or whatever, that introduces new legislation to pass more behavioral boundaries that the law enforcement apparatus can enforce. The architecture of suppression becomes increasingly elaborate and increasingly expensive in resources, in institutional energy, in the moral cost to keep the people that are operating it on all fronts. We see this in the expansion of the surveillance state. We see it in the proliferation of legal instruments. We see it in the increasingly aggressive prosecution of whistleblowers. People like Julian Assange, whose exposure of documented government behavior required the full weight of multiple governments' legal instruments to suppress for a very long time. We see it in the expanding definitions of what constitutes a national security threat, in what constitutes a hate crime, in what constitutes what they're throwing around hate speech. Each new layer of enforcement is a spell cast to maintain the strength of an earlier spell. And the system that requires this kind of continuous maintenance is not a stable system in the slightest. It is a system in the process of failing. The thumbnail's up there correctly. Responding to a comment. Somebody's asking about the thumbnail. The thumbnail is up there on purpose. I want it to be examined as I go through some of these sections. So they're trying to maintain the strength of older spells already cast with newer spells over and over and over again. It's a system in the process of failing, using increasing amounts of energy to sustain a story that is increasingly difficult to believe. And this is why everybody is waking up. This is why everybody is so interested in going to the internet and sharing how bad things are. Economically, as far as dirt in the street, as far as how homeless people are being treated, as far as how people in RVs are being treated as criminals in the state that they were born in and grew up in and whatnot. As all of these, as grocery store prices are being complained about, as rent is being complained about, everybody is noticing everything. Right? We are not able to believe the story that government is legitimate as easily as we were before. And so now let's talk about why game theory cannot really hold this together. Okay? And I can bring myself kind of back up for this section. And this is where Daniel Schmachtenberger's analysis connects directly to what we've been building in this episode and a couple episodes back. Schmachtenberger's work describes game theory as essentially the only functional ought, right? In the is-ought dynamic. The only functional ought currently guiding major institutional decision-making. Because game theory sort of, one of the conclusions in game theory that you have to understand is if you don't implement the right strategies, if you don't maintain the appearance of cooperation whilst also preparing for defection against whoever you're cooperating with, then you lose by default. Right? That's sort of built into game theory. So the only functional ought currently guiding major institutional decision-making is game theory, is wearing illusory cooperation, illusory harmony, and actually being willing to step on whoever's neck you need to win. Right? The idea that the right choice is the choice that doesn't lose. And he identifies the core problem precisely when he describes what he calls the multipolar trap. The net scenario of what everybody is racing to do makes the worst possible world for everyone, but nobody can stop it. Because if anyone stops, it's so much worse for them in the short term. take AI for instance. Nobody wants the world to be taken over by AI. Nobody wants our minds to be so heavily influenced by AI. Yet, this is exactly where we're headed, and nobody can stop it. Because whichever nation, whichever group of people, whichever region of the world stops first is taken over by the AI of another nation in due time. Right? You can take global warming, for instance. All of the ways that we are destroying, or just the destruction of the earth to the point of it's going to take, thousands of years or hundreds of years for that patch of earth to recover. And it's very heavily populated. That's happening everywhere. Yet nobody can stop it. Because as soon as you stop, the other countries that are continuing to do it and continuing to focus on, creating militaries and creating weaponry and creating strategies for mind control and all of this at higher and higher levels with sharper and sharper weapons and all of this nonsense, is so much worse for you in the short term if you start worrying about the environment. You're trying to be sustainable and patient and slow with your technological advancement. Apply that to the legal architecture we've been describing. Each actor within the system, each government agency, corporation, legal institution, right? All of them operating according to the game theoretic logic. We expand jurisdiction before someone else does. We define terms favorably before the contract is signed. We add the regulatory instrument before the gap creates a liability for us. All that's the game theoretic right there. Right? The individual moves all make local sense, and the aggregate result is a system of such complexity, such internal contradiction, and such distance from any coherent moral foundation that it can no longer perform its stated function. And Schmattenberger puts it very plainly. He says, quote, "The world you end up getting is maximum environmental destruction, maximum weapons, and maximum distrust." Right? There are three things that every great nation has: food, weapons, and trust. If you have to give one up, give up weapons. If you have to give two up, give up food. Never give up trust. But the world you end up with game theoretical foundations as your legislature, your sort of lawmakers' foundational approach to solving problems, what you get is maximum distrust, maximum weapons, maximum environment destruction. Now substitute legal complexity for environmental destruction, and the structure of the observation holds. The game theoretic foundation produces maximum institutional complexity, maximum extraction, and maximum distance between the stated purpose of the law and what the law actually results in. How the law results in so much blatant abuse. Right? Let me add this back to stage so that, is it gonna work? There we go. And then I can come here, possibly, oh no, so it's not adding that, it's actually sharing. Here we go. Where, we get all of this kind of stuff. Right? What the law actually does. And now let me add this to the stage. Oh, here we go. Boom. Add to stage.
Pepper sprayer? Is that what we do, officer?
Rochester, New York police try to force a 9-year-old girl into the back of their squad car, all as she screams nonstop for her dad.
I want my dad now!
Officers wrestle the girl dressed in bright floral leggings to the snowy ground, put her in cuffs.
Dirty jackboot thug pigs.
The child continues screaming for her father.
I want my dad!
They say they were called to her home after a report of family trouble.
You're acting like a child. I'm a child!
A female officer then issues this warning. She'd better comply or she'll be pepper sprayed.
This is your last chance, otherwise pepper spray's going in your eyeballs. Come on, let's go.
One cop has had enough.
Just spray her at this point.
The officer pumps out the pepper spray and the child screams for help.
Please, why my eye? Why my eye? Please.
Today, the police officers find themselves under fire from their own police chief. The girl...
Right? What the law actually does is completely different from its stated purpose. This is not a failure of implementation, good people. They're not just implementing the law wrong. It is the logical output of the foundation, game theory. A system built on finite game logic, where winning means ending the game on your terms. And that's applied to the infinite game of human life, right? You have finite games and infinite games when it comes to game theory, as far as the terms and whatnot are defined. And an infinite game cannot have finite game logic applied to it, or you get chaos like we have now. And we apply that finite game logic to the infinite game of human life, which will optimize for winning conditions that destroy the playing field for everyone. Because that's how you end the game of human life, is you destroy the playing field. You take out the vessel or you take out the land. And the legal architecture of contract law, extended through statutes, regulations, ordinances, executive orders, precedent, and the like, is the most elaborate finite game ever constructed. Every instrument is like a chess move. Every definition like another. Every new layer of enforcement is a move, and the game is consuming the entire field. But the inner storyteller always exists under it all, and that's where the work has to be done for us to begin to change our situation. Here's what connects all of this back to the work that we have to do. The entire architecture only functions because the inner storytellers are running stories that keep them inside said architecture. The story that the contract you signed means what you thought it meant. The story that the law is neutral and applies equally to all people. The story that the regulatory agency exists to protect you. The story that the government's authority is legitimate because a document says so. The story that is it's just how things work. And there's no real alternative because it's been thousands of years of it working this way. Each of those stories is a spell, good people. Each one installed before the person running it was really old enough to examine it. Each one maintained by the proliferating architecture of legal instruments, of public education on civics, and cultural repetition from the order-follower class that we've been describing all up and through this podcast. And each one, when examined honestly, using the same standard that we apply to everything on this channel, fails to hold up any logical backing. The contract law system works because people believe it works and act accordingly, and our obedience removed from that equation removes contract law's binding attribute. The moment enough inner storytellers examine the foundational premise and find it wanting, find it incomplete. The moment the sorting function of one's inner storyteller stops filing government authority into the legitimate drawer automatically. As soon as these things change, the spell dissolves into powerlessness. Not because a revolution happened on behalf of the person who was obedient. Not because reform occurred and a new law was passed, but only because the living observer changed. And as we've discussed a bunch of times, when the observer changes, what gets collapsed into the field of reality from the field of possibility changes. That is the work of the inner storyteller. That is why you buy the book and you read it. That is why you come to this channel and you hear me rant about these things, because the inner storyteller work is about changing what gets collapsed, manifested, if you will, into reality from the field of possibility. Not a legal argument, not a political position, a shift in the observation at the level where reality is actually being produced is required for what is produced to be more aligned with truth. And the question I always leave you guys with is, okay, so what story are you willing to live? And with that being said, good people, I hope that this episode felt as good to you as it did to me. Can't wait to see you again tomorrow for tomorrow's episode. Tomorrow we will be back on schedule at 6:30. Today we had a work trip. I went about an hour and a half, an hour, maybe hour 40 minutes or so away from home and came back, so I got back later. Plus I set up my new monitor. Very happy about that, very excited. But yeah, it's been an honor and a pleasure and a great time. Pardon me. I do wish you all a merry moment. That part. The meanings we make often keep us bound when built on a foundational understanding that is not true or incomplete. You know what I'm saying? Next Monday, John Bush will be here in the building with your boy. My hair is going to be done. It's going to be great. It's going to be a great time. John Bush runs Exit and Build. Nice, great conference where we learn how to implement what it means to tell ourselves and to live a more truthful story when it comes to our relationship with the government and the legitimacy of thereof, the legitimacy of the relationship with the government. So check out John Bush and all of his stuff, and I will see you all tomorrow. Peace and love.